Good morning friends and welcome back to NPTEL online certification course on Indian poetry in English. Today we are going to start a new phase of Indian poetry in English that can be considered as impressionistic poetry. In this we shall be discussing some poets who are yet to be considered a part of many Indian anthologies which are being published. My aim behind introducing these poets to this course is to familiarize them with the real Indian English poetry that is still being written. But of course, the need of the hour is that the critics as well as the anthologists paid attention to the voices of these poets. In this regard, the first poet that I am going to discuss today is Niranjan Mohanty. Now, you might be curious enough to know who Niranjan Mohanty is and what actually makes Niranjan Mohanty a poet. Fine. But before that, let us talk about Impressionism. You know, Impressionism, Expressionism, Experimentalism, all these actually came from the world of arts. The Impressionists were a school of painters whose painting had transitory effects of lights. It also had fleeting moments from a subjective point of view and also from the perception of the spectators. The major Impressionists were Claude Monet, Vincent van Gogh and Renoir. Impressionism as a vague term has got its interference in literature as well, and still it is considered to be quite vague. Many of the poets nowadays have started bringing impressionistic writings and they have brought impressionism in their writings. Actually, since it comes from the world of arts, impressionism is a sort of symbolism which actually expresses the inner forms of life comprising feelings, sensations and emotions, and it actually focuses upon subjective point of view. Many literary artists, especially in the field of fiction, Joseph Conrad, James Joyce and Henry James have also brought impressionism in their writings. Actually, these styles leaves the reader to ponder over the suggested meaning of the poem. There are suggestions. The poet or the writers may not say everything very clearly or vividly, but then there is a hint. When we look at Indian English poetry, we also find the writings of some of the poets having an imprint of impressionism in their works, namely Niranjan Mohanty, Charushil Singh, Bibhu Padhi and Gopi Kotor. So, today we shall take up Niranjan Mohanty and we will find out through his poetic oeuvres and through a good number of his poems how he has dealt with it and how one can find the pictures of impressionism in the poetic world of Niranjan Mohanty. Niranjan Mohanty reminds us, if we have a look at Niranjan Mohanty's works, Mohanty actually reminds us of another significant voice of Indian English poetry, Jayant Mahapatra, whom we have already discussed in the previous lectures. Actually, Mohanty was born on 12th April 1953 in Calcutta, though Mohanty is from Odisha, but since his father was working in Calcutta, Mohanty got his birth there in Calcutta. And Mohanty's early life was full of suffering. He could see a series of deaths, some of the deaths of his brothers, sisters and some of the other family members, which actually had a very bad effect on the psyche, on the mind of the poet. His early education, which started in Orissa, and later on he actually got appointed as a lecturer in Aska Science College, Orissa. As he progressed as a poet and also as a famous teacher, he could have the opportunity of joining Santiniketan in the year 1999. Actually, Santiniketan might have paved his way and could have sharpened his poetic sensibility more than anything else, but then it was only Santiniketan from where he actually he died in the year 2008. Now, Mohanty as a poet had quite a good many qualities. He was actually, since he had to see a lot of struggle in his family, poverty, suffering, several deaths. So, it made Mohanty a human to the core. What he writes in his poetry is actually soaked in the Orisian landscape and also to a larger extent the Indian reality. One can come across the depiction of natural beauties, superstitious beliefs, faiths. All of them we shall be discussing when we take up some of the poems of Mohanty to justify his poetic oeuvre. Mohanty was not only a poet, but he was also a translator who translated from Oriya and Bengali into English and Bengali into Oriya. Calcutta actually paved his path to progress, because it could give him or contribute to him two languages in addition to English, which he was quite in love with as a language. In one of his poetry collections, what Mohanty writes can pave a way to getting Mohanty as a poet introduced, when he says, "Merely to be human is the gist, is the theme song of my life, of my poetry." So, through these lines we can take a peep in the poetic oeuvre of Mohanty. Mohanty was deeply rooted in Indian culture, Indian traditions. So, one can also call Mohanty a traditionalist poet, but then there are certain taboos against which Mohanty raises his voice, and some of the malpractices which are being followed in our society in everyday lives. So, that also get a picture depicted in the poetic world of Mohanty. Mohanty actually shares a certain relation with God, and Mohanty can be considered to be a sort of meditative, a sort of devotional poet, a poet who not only writes only because he has a sort of imagination, but in his imagination he also creates a sort of link between tradition and modern. So, his relation with God, where he can honestly express his despair, the despair that he had witnessed since beginning. Now, it is quite natural that majority of you would like to know about Mohanty's poetry collections. So, his poetic journey started with silencing the words, silencing the words. Now, majority of the titles of Mohanty's poem, they in itself tell a lot and hide a lot, as I understand. So, silencing the words came out in 1977, which can be considered to be full of intellectualism. Perhaps as a poet, he was actually trying to find out his own way, a sort of mode, a sort of medium. And then came "Oh, This Bloody Game" in 1988, then "Prayers to Lord Jagannath," "On Touching You" and other poems. Actually, these two poetry collections, "Prayers to Lord Jagannath" and "Krishna," made Mohanty very famous as a religious poet. But when we delve deep into it, we find that Mohanty does not consider God to be God. Rather, he actually provides God with the human qualities, with personal qualities, and creates a sort of rapport that we shall find and enjoy. Then came "Lifelines" in 1999, then "Krishna" again, fine, "Krishna" again, and then "House of Rains," and then the last was "Tiger" and other poems. I actually had an opportunity to meet Niranjan Mohanty on 2 times, but then I was so shattered when in 2008 he just took leave of all of us all of a sudden, because Mohanty was a heart patient, and in 2008 without any prior notice or whatsoever, the cruel hands of God snatched Mohanty from us. Now, let us try to find out Mohanty's mind and art, but it would be rather better if we can have a look at Mohanty's poetic world before we come to say something more about Mohanty. But then Mohanty considered that poetry has got a cleansing effect. Poetry had got a cleansing effect, and in one or many interviews he has quite clarified it, that it was just a way to cleanse the self. One can find a conflict between body and the soul in majority of the poems of Niranjan Mohanty, and whatever he writes in his poem, he actually has got a mission, he has got a sort of objective. One can find cultural crisis and complexities of human relationships in some of the poems. Say for example, when he talks about the lifelines, he talks about some of his very close people, meaning thereby those people who have been associated with him since long, and then he creates, Mohanty rather, creates a pen picture of those people, and through that he actually tries at times to mock at times to sock at, and at times to delve deep into the human behavior as well. There is an element of loneliness, struggle, and contemporary issues abound in Mohanty's world, and it also reminds us of a tradition of Bhakti movement, of a tradition of Bhakti poetry that we will find. In A House of Rains, what Mohanty says can give an inkling to his poetic art when he says, writing poems, I have passionately believed that unless the words are dipped in the river of love, they refuse to be famed, refuse to resonate with new meanings, they refuse to boil like rice in an earthen pot put on the hearth. It is because of fulfilling dance, it is because of their fulfilling dance, and that the poem begins to assume its being, it begins to breathe, whisper. That is why when one reads Silencing the Words, one can find that Mohanty believes that it is not the words that only speak, rather it is the silence that speak. Words can melt, what he says, words can melt, and what remains is silence, and this silence is meaningless, it is not unworthy. So, what a poet needs to do is, a poet needs to silence the words. Poet needs to silence the words. We can also take some of the characteristics of Mohanty's poems. Mohanty, through one collection or the other, actually depicts the ugliness of society. One can find plethora of examples dealing with the crying children, hopeless widows, beggars, lepers, girls who are being raped to death, then the tortures of women, suicide, dowry, unemployment, and quite a good number of issues. One can find Mohanty's world full of ironic descriptions, where he talks about the degradation of the society and the contemporary society now, I mean the society that we are living in has actually deteriorated, and he finds this deterioration getting shape in the form of words through which he silences. Mohanty can be considered to be a post-colonial poet who bends tradition with modernity. There is no denying the fact that Mohanty can be considered to be a poet of the common man, a poet of the common man. Now, let us take a note of some of Mohanty's famous collections, because it is very difficult to allow these 30 minutes only to some of the, because Mohanty's world is so vast. But then the first and some of the important collections actually deserve attention. So, the first collection, which is Silencing the Words, that has got 14 poems and they are in 6 segments. It is full of intellectuality. Many people can also call it a sort of the poetic snobbery, where the poet was perhaps trying to find out a mode, and it has got a lot of symbols used. Since Mohanty here also mentions various Orishan landscapes, so one can also find Mohanty to have a sort of closeness with the Jayanta Mahapatra. At times there are obscure images also in plenty in the world of Mohanty. We can take some of the lines to attest to the truth of what Mohanty really dwells in. In winter nights, idle whisperings behind the blanket bring you more close to me. Words have already melted in the shaft of mercury light. Few months later, we were blessed. It actually talks about a couple's relationship, and then in a very subtle way he says that whisperings also have got meanings, silence also have got meanings, and it is this silence which actually heralds a new beginning, and this new beginning is the birth of, is the multiplication of more people on earth. Mohanty also talks about the rumors that are spread, the rumors that prevail in and around us, and there also he says that how the two members, even in a bond, even in a relationship, how they are also at times affected with the in and around activities taking place, and in such a situation rumor has a great role to play. Rumors like airborne diseases relate many words, words many truths. Mohanty is actually an expert at word play. He says relate many words, words many truths, and a lie of light and shade. We can find the use of contraries here. Reforming your beauty, frosts of night have chilled your passion. Your complaint against rumors begets disaffection. Silence is God. So, for Mohanty, it is not only the words that matter, rather it is the silence that matter, because silence is actually at the root of many creation. But maybe in our life, when rumors come, they create a sort of chaos, and we actually miss those beautiful hours when silence brings us closer, but at the same time rumor comes in between, and this rumor is a sort of pollutant. Now, another poem which is actually very important, which talks about several relationships, entitled On This Bloody Game. Now, here this collection comprises 52 poems, and which actually deal with the complexities of human life, complexities of various relationships. One can get an imprint of loneliness, obsession with death and suffering, but in a way it talks about the contemporary reality. Here there is a dialogue between the father and the son. Here there is actually the voice. I mean, he in a way talks about the traditions that at times bind us and at times ban us also, traditions which also distance us. And then the poet very beautifully says, but I have chosen to be lonely, for loneliness has its secret roots of bliss, secret nests of joy. How am I to know what flows within, what makes me myself, what saps my song, if I am not alone? So, like silence, loneliness also has a boon, and the poet actually tries to find out some fruits which can beget in the hours of idleness, in the hours of loneliness. Now, when we come to certain relationships, we find that how a father often mentors his own son, often mentors his own child, and then the growth of the child is actually twisted, but the child's voice is often ignored, and Mohanty has his opinion about that, in a way his sentiments, when he writes, I have grown expert in wooing women, teasing children, mocking at sense, as clumsy as politicians. So, you see how beautifully there is a sort of suggestiveness in Mohanty's world when he says that I have grown expert in wooing women, teasing children, mocking at sense, as clumsy as politicians. There is a simile in it, but there are metaphorical meanings also involved within. I made cross-legged with that prostitute who sings Hosanna for me under the Kadamba tree. Now, the son who actually has come to this world, son is growing mature, son is growing adult-like, and the son says that, Father, oh, this bloody game, so let me be free from this bloody game, because I have my own senses, and I can find not only loneliness, but I can also find the isolation. At the same time, I can find a sort of rejoicings, because I know how to woo, how to love, and I can also know how what has been disregarded or discarded, often there is a magic in it, often there is a music in it. Actually, as I told earlier, what we should, or what all our readers should look forward to getting in Mohanty is the religious note. How in one poem after another, for example, if we take Krishna, the moment we talk about Krishna, there is a sort of devotional meaning that comes in and between. And you know, we start thinking of Lord Krishna, and we think that Krishna, who has got all the colors of life. But here when we take, when we go to the world of Mohanty, we find that Mohanty not only attributes human qualities, but then with his fertile imagination, he actually delves deep and makes Krishna, Krishna the beloved and Radha the lover. Fine. And there are, there are role reversals, there are quite many things. Krishna is not a god, but a god in human form. Fine. So, Mohanty actually defies the traditional view that Krishna is a god. He actually says Krishna is only an incarnation, and then here he tries to, with the help of his own imagination, present or delineate Krishna in human form. The famous poem which focuses upon the relationship of man and woman. So, we all revere Krishna, but Mohanty actually reveres Krishna in a different way. Through Krishna, he actually brings about the man-woman relationship as immaculate togetherness. Love is actually a force that can defy all sorts of hostilities. Love is actually a force that can melt all sorts of emotions. Love is a force that actually comes to bind and also at times blind. So, through Krishna, Mohanty presents Radha as mighty before Krishna. Radha is mightier than Krishna, someone who nurtures love, and the poet raises voice against the atrocities which Radha face. So, Radha here is a sort of metaphor for all women who are actually in love. There is a connection between womanhood and nature. There are metaphysical abstractions also. We can also take some of the lines in order to justify our line of thinking and to see Mohanty's depiction of Krishna through our own eyes. Not only does Mohanty provide human qualities to Krishna, but then one can also find the depiction of the predicament of women in a patriarchal society, and that is why Mohanty picturizes Krishna as less mightier than Radha. So, depiction of love in all manifestations. We shall read some of the lines in order to prove our line of thinking. As long as we pursue this game, heart and soul together, you are yourself, I myself, no one loses, no one gains. We often say that in love there is often, there is often a conflict, who is the winner. But then love has got a cementing force, love has got a blinding force, a binding force, and that is why Krishna says, this game is my cradle, my alphabet book, the geometry of my wound, my hospital, my extinguishable pyre. Actually, if one gets time to read and enjoy Krishna, I think it will take a whole day and whole week, because the lines are so beautiful, and I am at times tempted. So, I will also share with you some more beautiful lines also. I know it is your love that outweighs mine, I am a mere sprig of grass, you a mighty oak. Now, Krishna says that Radha, you are great. What am I? I am mere sprig of grass, you a mighty oak. You have got that sheltering power. I a withered twig, I am a withered twig, meaning thereby in love one has to be very humble. Love actually does not know the difference between great and small, because love itself is vast, love itself is great. You are a lofty tree whose leaf fringed legions would take me centuries to celebrate through the slender hollow of my flamboyant flute. You are a shelter, and I can I can take on centuries to celebrate through the slender hollow. Even the flute that I am playing just to call you, but I am also trying to celebrate through the slender hollow of my flamboyant flute. What? Your loftiness, your beauty, your benignity. Time and again, and then see how the poet makes a beautiful use of imagination when he says, time and again I assume human form to purify what is divine in me. People consider me to be divine, but I am as human as anyone. But I keep on changing, I keep on assuming human form. Time and again I am born on this earth. So, people who attribute divine qualities to me, I want to come down to the earth in order to celebrate your love, rather to test the sweetness of corn or rice that are grown between the veil of your bee hunting breasts. Fine. So, let me take the human form so that I can enjoy the benignities of human love. So, in a way, it is not the love between Radha and Krishna. In a way, it is actually love between man and woman. And time and again, Krishna says, I know that I am in a burning paradox, I am insignia of all that is paradoxical, and that is why I need you so earnestly, so urgently. That is why I hope to become a silent part of your body, so that the sting of my own ambivalence won't haunt me as it does now. I wish I could ripen with your love. There comes a time when Krishna says that I do not want to die, fine, because I do not want to see you a widow, fine. See the imagination of the poet. If I were not born as Krishna and you as Radha, I would have remained yours, faithfully yours. Do names matter? Now, the poet, while talking about love, also makes at times some questions of identity, and he says, do names matter? Can you tell me the name of the bird that sits and sings in the cage of your body? The sort of nimbleness that you have, Radha. Where do the names go? Where do the words go when body becomes a mere shadow? He also hints at the worthlessness of this body. And he says, why to boast of all these things when we all know that names do not matter? It is actually the sweetness, it is actually the memory that matters. Perhaps so long as you treat me as divine, abstract, distant and digi, look at the alliterative use, as divine, abstract, distant and digi, I can't get answers to all my questions. I can't solve the riddle, the mystery of my problems, as long as I am not born in human form on the earth. I am not a god. I actually want to take a human form because I have to resolve several issues, I have to resolve several riddles, several mysteries. And the acme of love, the culmination of love that one can find when Krishna says, my fair lady, I am human, my needs are human too. Whatever I possess or dispossess is human. In whatever form I love you, I remain human. You are the acme of my human need, my dear. So, in this line, the poet actually wants to tell that man and women are the needs. Man and women are complementary to each other, and then the relation between man and woman is not only romantic, but it is actually religious. So, when you start attributing me with the divine qualities, perhaps I am deprived of all the love that is there on earth. No? At times or the other, we start thinking what a sort of life we are leading. But then when Krishna yearns for a life on earth, then we can understand what a beautiful life we are perhaps enjoying on this beautiful earth. Fine. So, we can go on and on when we start discussing Niranjan Mohanty as a poet, but then we can also take some other aspects of Mohanty's poetry, where he talks about in the famous collection House of Rains, because since the poet is from Odisha and Odishan landscape is always on his mind, like Jayant Mahapatra. So, he is also struggling for his own identity, and his nostalgia reminds him of the cremated grounds where many of his forefathers have been cremated of long. So, in the House of Rains, we can find multiple voices of rains in his poems, where he talks about the creation and the destruction, where he talks about the force of the rain. And we can take one very beautiful stanza where he says, and then he also talks about some other issues, namely the issues of faith and other things, where he says that I never go to temples, I envy those who go. How nicely they go pious, ringing the bells, swaying holy flowers, perhaps it is fear, the gist of my existence. So, now there is also a dig, there is also an irony when he talks about these religious practices, but at the same time he also talks about how man, because he is frightened of death, man, because he is frightened of his own existence, he actually goes to ring the bell in the temples and offer the flowers. So, the poet at times becomes quite realistic, because he also talks about the several problems that are in and around, and he justifies that it is only because of the fear of death that people go to offer their prayers to God. One poem entitled Kalahandi, which is actually infamous for the hunger and for actually the drought and all. So, he also provides a sort of a beautiful depiction of the landscapes, where he talks about how poverty and how the scarce of food has actually converted people, where he says, like lights limpid leap into the pool. Whatever poem you read about Mohanty, you can find a beautiful combination of alliteration, assonance, fine, and consonance. Like lights limpid leap into the pool of darkness, this sudden awareness of a place or face makes one drown in the rising waters of the sea of nothingness. Fine, thick ribbed, thin necked mountains stare everywhere like grandparents, patches of unkind cloud. I mean, there are no rains, and that is why the problem persists. Fine. So, you can read it at your own disposal, because I have some more important poems also to discuss. Fine. Actually, when we talk about Kalahandi, we do know that this actually Kalahandi is a geographical legacy of the place, and when the poem actually ends, the poet says, how can one contribute? So, the poet actually raises a question. And the poet shows that, like just like Wordsworth, that nature can not only be malign always, nature can also be benign always, and man has to face the offshoots of nature at times. So, there is a sort of consciousness, and this consciousness appears in various forms. One thing that I wanted to share with you all is that his prayers to Lord Jagannath, where once again this became very famous. Here also the poet is not depicting the qualities of the Lord, but the poet actually in a very interrogative manner raises certain questions, and at the same time the poet also wants Lord Jagannatha to be his guide, and he wants Lord Jagannatha to educate the people. And there are end number of lines which go on, where he says that it is only because of Lord Jagannatha that we could get the language that we are using. It is only because of Lord Jagannatha that we are. But at times the poet also takes a dig at the worldly atrocities, at the worldly chaos, and then the poet also says that how can, if the Lord is so powerful, how can the Lord keep quiet when there are several atrocities being played in the name of caste, creed, nationality and what not. We shall take up some lines. Teach me how to sharpen my belief and polish the stone of my faith in the essence of a human heart. Fine. So, wants Lord Jagannatha to become his God. And then he raises a question and says, what knowledge, what wisdom, what power made my mother's tongue so sharp, so humble, so human and so bright. So, he says that while we have got a language which at times is harsh and humble, but at the same time the poet, as he moves on, he says, often but then looking at the worldly picture, the poet is aggrieved at the rising tension, at the killings of people, no, nameless killings in the name of some belief or the other, and he says, often when cornered by grief, I light incense sticks at day's end, closing my eyes and standing still. So, dear Lord, at times when I feel cornered, I actually close my eyes and still wait for you. But what are you doing? And the poet says, are we born to demolish mosques and temples? So, there is actually a hint at the destruction that we have caused. Rob the deities of their robes. Fine. What else is cruelty, O Lord? You have become so mute. Do you not see how we humans have been behaving with each other? Fine. We are actually disrobing the deities of their robes. What can be more cruel than this? It is true that nothing possesses me so madly, so deeply, so neatly as does the rotundity of your eyes. So, he also tries to create a sort of physical manifestation of Lord Jagannatha, and he says then, oh Lord, let us mutually agree to exchange our positions. You are sitting there, so can we not exchange our positions? You come down to earth. So, there is actually a sort of invocation to Lord Jagannatha, so that he could come down to the earth, and I fly to your throne bearing all mirth. Let us sort out our follies and differences, so that you being wise become a fool, I being an idiot become a wisdom pool. Now, he says, let us exchange our positions. If you come to this world, perhaps you will be able to resolve so many riddles. If you come to this world and you can only educate people like me who are fools. So, let me take your position and you take mine, and in this way only all the follies of the world, all the falsities of the world, all the indifferences and differences of the world will be mitigated. Oh Lord, can you not do that? Fine. So, through this prayers to Lord Jagannatha, it is not only a prayer, but through these prayers the poet actually talks about the contemporary situation of the world. So, my aim here is to familiarize you with the poetic world of Niranjan Mohanty. But then it would be an injustice if I do not take the last collection of Mohanty, which is entitled Tiger and Other Poems, which was composed and which got published in 2008, the year when Mohanty breathed his last. So, in Tiger and the Other Poems, again this is very symbolical. Tiger actually becomes a metaphor here. There are other poems as well, but there is quite a good number of poems which are in the name of tiger only. And the tiger, through this tiger, the poet has actually as a purpose to serve. The purpose of how the tiger is powerful, but how the tiger when he loses power. So, tiger is a metaphor here, and through tiger the poet actually mocks at this contemporary world and its situation. How one tries to overpower, how one tries to dominate, how one tries to show one's force, but then the worldly go of the world and the customs of the world is that every tiger sometimes or the other will become old. So, if you can read some of the poems, it will really be a delight to delve deep into the world of Niranjan Mohanty. Through this poem, the poet actually talks about the various four faiths, natural bounties, ecological concern, various superstitions, and the tiger, he says, it is actually a manifold reality. Tiger is an existential force, and the entire collection is meditative and symbolic. Tiger is a symbol of beauty. It reminds us of the tiger of William Blake, tiger, tiger burning bright. But here there are in this collection more than 80 to 90 times the use of tiger, and through tiger the poet actually wages a war, and the poet satisfies himself as well. He says, the tiger wakes us to the infirmities, weaknesses. The tiger wakes us to the infirmities of our bones, the marrow within bones. We will also take up some of the poems from Tiger and other poems, so that you can understand. In the beginning, in one of the poems entitled Escaping into You, he says, I collect fables of my dreams. Here he talks about the dreams. And then here he talks about love, that as a lover I am just like a crow, and every day I am gathering, because as a crow I am thirsty of love, every day I am gathering pebbles one after another, so that the margin of your love would rise to quench my thirst. And then some poems from which are actually in the name of Tiger. The Tiger and I. There is one poem entitled The Tiger and I will take up only a few poems, because I know time is at our back. Who can disown whom? Neither I the tiger, nor the tiger myself. So, if you consider yourself as tiger to be very important, very powerful, no, neither man nor the tiger is powerful. This is perhaps the only thing common between ourselves, the point where we meet, as though it were a zone where all else looks insipid, shadow-like, insignificant. Fine. And then there is another poem entitled The New Tiger, and in New Tiger he actually says how, in several institutions also, namely in several religions also, the tiger as a metaphor enters and destroys everything. This is not the new year, yet I can see a new tiger moving into the mosque, staining and tinting the flower that blooms in every heart. My dear friends, please mark, there is a note, there is a suggestive note. I see it approaching, every now and then I see it approaching towards Sankat Mochan temple, causing cries, echoes of heart-rending cries which redden waves of the Ganges and silence voices of other woes between one darkness and another. I think it is written so in a simplistic manner, but then there is a suggestiveness that can actually help you understand the meaning of the suggestion that the poet actually tries to wrap through his words. Now, the last poem that I am going to take up is The Tiger Has No Meaning, and this actually talks about the worthlessness of life, the worthlessness of power, the worthlessness of dominance and all, because ultimately the poet is existential, the poet is post-colonial, my dear friend, and this poem says, the tiger has no meaning, and the poem continues, the tiger has no meaning. No, tiger is only a metaphor. It draws me close to dreams of becoming a nameless bird. Someday it makes me accept that I have a right to perpetuate my dreams. Everyone has got ambition, but the moment you become a tiger, or the moment you have the tigerish quality, then perhaps your dreams are destroyed. To perpetuate my dreams and to know how seasons come and go. So, seasons also come and go. So, the force that you are so proud of, that is also destructive, it will come and go. How moments ripen between yes and no, how aloes of my love lave the dale in the uninted absence of the tiger. So, do you really think that it is only the tiger that is very important? My dear friends, Niranjan Mohanty's poetic oeuvre is so vast that it can continue for a long time, but let us very quickly take up some of the views of critics who have said something or the other about which is really worth noticing. Charushil Singh, another poet whom you will discuss in the later lectures, says, whether it is Lifelines or his last collection Tiger and other poems, Mohanty remains a poet of the common people. He is a poet of the common people. He does not have the ostentations of the urban poetry or whatsoever. We can find the rural poetry, we can find the images which are from the rural landscape and all. His germinative powers border on a poetic mythology which just falls short of an Aurobindo or Tagore. So, one can find an echo of Aurobindo or Tagore in the world of Niranjan Mohanty. Mohanty's poems, another important poet and critic, Chambial, says his poems draw critical attention as they are crafted out of his intimate experiences of life. There is no display of any influence of the masters of poetry in the past, yet his poems are not as simple as they seem to any common reader. So, though I have already discussed the poetic oeuvre of Niranjan Mohanty, but it would always be better if you can have a feel and you can enjoy, and if you can rejoice in the poetic world of Niranjan Mohanty. But the time has come to estimate Mohanty as a poet. Mohanty, as we have been discussing, he blends tradition and modernity. His poetic world ranges from religion to culture to social mores and customs. His imagination is fertile. Niranjan Mohanty is truly an Indian English poet because he also talks about various post-colonial questions where he tries to hide meaning and where he actually means to hide. Mohanty's poetic world not only educates but also entertains, and his word play has got quite a magical effect. Let me sum up this lecture once again, taking some lines from Niranjan Mohanty, and the lines are very representative not only of Niranjan Mohanty as a poet, but also as an Indian, where he says, and where he actually talks about the Indian masses in general, where he says, I am bound by karma and dharma. I believe not only in action, but I also believe in religion. I believe in fate. I believe in horoscope and palmistry, the typical Indian. And at times I am superstitious. Although I dissected bellies and brains of toads and cockroaches, earthworms, that superstition compelled me to keep you away from my 13th sequence. These lines are actually from Prayers to Lord Jagannatha, 14th section. And with this, let me come to wind up this talk, but let us remember that Mohanty was a poet par excellence. I invite you all to read the works of Mohanty. Thank you very much. I wish you all a good day.